We've got another great story to share with you today, an inspiring journey into local government leadership, because that's what we do here on the HaltingWinter podcast. We tell the stories behind the titles, the unique paths into public service, and the moments that shape how these leaders show up, even when the work gets heavy. Every day, local government quietly makes modern life possible, and behind every service is a person doing work that often goes unseen. This is the HaltingWinter podcast, and I'm Seth Winterhalter. Every week, I have the pleasure of sitting down with local government leaders from across the country that remind us where government really lives, locally, doing the work that truly matters. This is the work that builds belonging. Before we hear today's conversation, I want to take a moment to thank our sponsors. Tyler Technologies has been exclusively serving the public sector since 1998, partnering with cities and counties to make their work more manageable, more connected, and more effective. From smarter budgeting to artificial intelligence, Tyler equips local governments with software and solutions that help leaders serve with clarity, efficiency, and impact. You can explore a variety of free resources at tylertech.com/winter. That's tylertech.com/winter. And if today's conversation resonates with you, I want to invite you to check out the Municipal Leadership Development Circle. It's a global community of local government leaders who are committed to growing together, supporting one another, and leading well in the middle of municipal pressure. You can learn more about the MLDC at haltingwinter.com/MLDC. That's haltingwinter.com/MLDC. And now, let's turn to today's conversation. My guest on the podcast today is Ken Striplin, City Manager in Santa Clarita, California. Looking forward to, I can already feel the warmth in my bones as I'm staring at you here. I wish the blinds were open so I could see the sun. It is a gray day here in Seattle. But Ken, welcome to the podcast. A real pleasure to have you on today.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
Looking forward to unpacking just an incredible career, really some things that jump out to me, leadership development, employee engagement. How do we highlight the great work that's happening in local government? So I can't wait to unpack what's going on there in Santa Clarita. But before we get to the professional career, let's do what we do. Let's take it back, rewind. Tell us a little bit about where you were born and the childhood that kind of shaped you and led you into your unique story.
Sure. Well, I was born and raised not too far from where I am right now, about 45 minutes to an hour north of here, up in the northern LA County area. Was, like I said, born and raised there, spent the years there. My mother and father were obviously a big influence in my life. My dad was an aircraft worker for Lockheed for about 50 years before he finally retired not too long ago. So mom was a stay-at-home mom that took care of me, my brother, and my sister. It was back then it was a very small town. It was like probably 35,000 when I was growing up. And now it's two cities of, over 100,000 each. So it's definitely grown and changed. But I went to high school there, graduated, and then eventually made my way to Cal State Northridge.
So when you're growing up, is there any awareness of local government? Did you have any family members that, had a career or maybe served in elected office?
No, there really wasn't. My grandfather on my dad's side apparently ran for Congress from in Arizona, but I did not know him. So it was kind of more of just a story passed down over time. But as I mentioned, my dad and most of my family worked in aircraft and aerospace. So I didn't really have much exposure there. I'd say that it wasn't until my senior year where I took a civics class in government, and that really sparked my interest in it. And so as I was graduating, I was going through that class, and as I graduated, that sparked my interest, so to speak, and being and looking at a kind of a career either in government or just kind of back and forth between being elected politics or potentially going to law school. But that was kind of the thing that kind of sparked my interest, was that one class in high school.
Interesting. So what were you kind of, as you're growing up, are you an athlete? What are you kind of spending your time doing? And where did you think, were you pretty, you're going to do an undergrad in political science. Were you pretty specific into local government or law, or was it kind of general, just kind of finding your way? What was it like as you were growing up?
Yeah, when I was growing up, I played football and I ran track in high school. I also was ASB president, so I think that got me a little more interested in the so-called elected politics, if you will. And then as I mentioned, going through the class and kind of trying to look at those different pathways, trying to figure out which way I wanted to go. It was probably my freshman, well, I guess my junior year, my first year at Cal State Northridge. I took a class in government, and it was all about local government. So my experience prior to that had been mostly, federal, state type government classes and international relations, things of that nature. But there was one class that was all about local government. So that's what really sparked my interest, and ultimately what led me to local government um, outright, because one of my professors was taught in a program, the master's program. And at that time, the current city manager of Santa Clarita was teaching in the program as kind of an adjunct professor. And so as we got to my senior year of college, we had a service class, so to speak, where it wasn't really a class. It was go out and work somewhere in a field. And then at the end of it, write about your experience. Kind of thing. So as I was looking for that internship opportunity, he kind of put me on to Santa Clarita. And that's where I met the first city manager. That's where I got my first internship. And that's what kind of sparked the whole career here at Santa Clarita for me.
Oh, I love it. And so it's so fascinating, again, these little experiences that we have. And it's usually, like you just said, an experience. It's not, yeah, you had the political, you had that government class in high school, and it's kind of like, oh, this is interesting. And then you kind of have a class again, but it's that cool experience that you have to go and can get your hands dirty and see it. And I think that's the cool thing about local government is I continue to say, I just don't know if there's a field of interest or a skill that can't find a purpose and mission in local government, because it's so expansive, from water to public works to HR to et cetera, economic development. And so going back, when you take that class that's experiential, again, is that the first time you even knew what a city manager was, when you're introduced to that? And what was that like? What did you kind of do, or what do you remember about that experience? It was like, wow, this is where this looks cool. This looks like purposeful.
Yeah, I guess two things. One is I did mention, but at the time, I'd already gotten an internship in a local elected office. I was working for an assembly member down in Northridge area. And so I was interning there, kind of getting experience of what that site looked like. And then I was able, pretty close to when I got the first one, got the second internship. So I was doing two internships at the same time, which really was great for me, because as I mentioned, I think I was kind of initially, just based on my exposure and my knowledge, was looking at elected politics. And then I got the internship. At the time, I had no idea what a city manager was. I had no idea about the structure. So to me, it was a great, compare and contrast, being in two different roles at the same time. And when I got the internship here, just being involved in everything. I was fortunate to be in the city manager's office. I was fortunate to have a city manager that was very inclusive, and really believed in developing young people and kind of bringing them around and exposing them to the profession. And so it was just night and day experience I had, the impact, the things I was working on, and really just opened my eyes to a profession that I really didn't know anything about, and then fell in love with right away.
So cool. And just to highlight again that reality of, here's someone working, obviously busy, city managers are busy, department leads are busy, but if there's a way to find time to carve out to teach at a class, to be adjunct, to do something, I think that is so important to helping young people find a pipeline and find avenues into just awareness, but also participation in local gov. And so you go from you get your undergrad in political science, and did you go right into your MPA?
Yeah, I think I took maybe 1 year off. Yeah, I think it took 1 year off, and then jumped right back into it.
And so did you know, after you did that internship, that it was like, okay, I think I found my place? Like, when you did the MPA, was it like you gung ho kind of had the lenses set for it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, for me at the time, I was in an internship. The city's been, and I can say the same thing about today as it was 30 years ago. The city's very dynamic. So we got a lot of changes going on. The city was growing, still adding staff, still taking on services. I think when I got to Santa Clarita, we were only 9 years old. So there was a lot of growth and a lot of things happening. And so, after that first 6 months or so, I was, this is what I want to do. This is where I want to be. And so part of that, being a younger person, I think I was 22 at the time, was, I saw that master's degree as an opportunity to close the gap, if you will, on the experience side that I'd be competing with people in the position at the time. Master's degrees now, everyone has one. 20, 30 years ago, when I was, just got it, it was more rare. Right. And so for me, that was an equalizer for me to jump into that, to get that additional educational side of it to add to the work experience to kind of make me more competitive for ultimately getting a full-time job here in Santa Clarita.
And so after that internship, again, that happens during your undergrad, when did you start working for the city? What did you ever during the MPA? Did you have an internship outside of Santa Clarita? What did that look like?
No, that was it. I got hired as an intern. I spent about 6 months. I quit the other internship, so I was focused on here. I was still going to school my senior year, so I got another part-time job that was just paying the bills, so to speak. But after about 10 months, I got my first job as an administrative analyst here. So I got hired on full time. And then from there, it's just been an amazing opportunity after opportunity and working in different places throughout the organization, different positions. And again, getting to what you said originally is having a city manager that really believed in developing people, moving people, creating an organization that is very dynamic and filled with people who have capacity, maybe not years of experience, but that kind of grew with the organization.
This is so cool. It's so cool that your story is one city from really an internship in undergrad all the way through now to the city manager position. So this is going to be great to really get a bird's eye view of, and again, a place that has grown rapidly. I would imagine and now the population of Santa Clarita, I think, is around 230,000 today. What was the population back when you did that internship? Do you remember?
Yeah, it's funny you ask. I have a meeting with all the new staff that comes in. Anyone that gets hired, I do about a quarterly meeting where do an initial meet the city manager. I get to meet the new employees that come in. And I tell this story about, how my trajectory and what it was like when I got here. I think the population back then was about 100 to 110,000. We were approximately 40 square miles in size. And then as you fast forward to where we are today, almost 235,000, and we're over 80 square miles. So virtually, in essence, we've doubled both in size and land mass population or size over the last 30 years. And we're still one of the few cities in California that's got that growth room still where, we probably, if I had to guess, looking at the general plan numbers, we're probably 300,000 at build out. And so we've still got lots of development projects and things that we're contending with.
And I'm sure we're going to talk about that and we'll weave it into the story, but that kind of growth is insane. Like when you think about, and again, people just don't understand local government, but when you think about having to provide the infrastructure for that kind of growth, that's not just roads, that's the water, the sewer, the trash pickup, the emergency response. Like again, these like a garbage truck, you're talking like $500,000 for a garbage truck. Like this is just, it can be insane. Right. And you're trying to also, I think one of the cool things I like to point out too, is with growth, a lot of the work that you're having to do is prepare for that. It's not like you can just throw up a housing development. It's like all the infrastructure it takes to build that out, and where's that money come from? And so it's just a unique world. And so if you like challenge, if you like having a lot of things going on, local government will keep your attention for these things. So let's talk about that. So walk us through some of the positions, and we'll kind of just look at, you said you started as an analyst. Was it again? We have these terms sometimes. I'm a management analyst. What in the world is this? And so, walk us through kind of what you did and kind of what the path was.
Sure. So as I mentioned, about 10 months in, I got hired as an analyst, and I was, I started the city manager's office where I was helping with just general administrative stuff, some budgets, some risk management stuff. I got hired as an analyst in the administrative services department. So with them, that's human resources, not human resources, information technology and finance were the two primary divisions within the department. But really gave me an opportunity. I spent about roughly 2 years there, 2.5 years, and did worked more extensively on the budget. Got a lot of the finance back of the operation finance experience and how the numbers come together, where they go, how you cost allocate. I got some experience with issuing bonds and municipal leases. So really a crash course in accounting finance 101, which has really been helpful over time. From there, as I mentioned, we had what we call like we still have it today. It's a rotation program. And so once we have a management analyst group, and it's made up of a management analyst from each department. And we tell them that they're kind of a team, if you will, that are assigned to individual departments, but they have a reporting relationship to me. Because oftentimes what I'll do is there's something in the organization that I want studied, if there's an audit, some special project that comes up that kind of crosses departmental lines, we'll bring them together as a group and they'll work on that as kind of a team project organizationally. And so same thing, back then. So I got rotated from the administrative services. I moved back to the city manager's office. And from them, I had the other side of the budget. So I had the policy side of the budget, the decision-making aspects of the budget, putting it all together, running the whole process from start to end. I had risk management, had policy development. And with there, I had a lot of different experiences. So I was an MA, but, I remember, one of my favorite stories to tell is, I was walking down the hallway one day on a Friday afternoon, and the city manager, called me to his office, and he goes, "Hey, I'm going to send the HR manager at the time. I'm going to send her over to Public Works, and she's going to be the interim director for 6 months until we fill that position." And I was like, "All right." And he goes, "So how would you like to be the HR manager?" And I was more than happy. I was like, "Hey, absolutely." I didn't really know that much about HR. I think I was 24 years old at the time. But he was like, "Hey, here's an opportunity. You want to do it?" And I was like, 100% from you. So I had an opportunity to spend a little over a year. It lasted a little over a year at Human Resources, learning a lot about the personnel system, personnel rules, benefits, compensation, that whole, again, a really fundamental aspect of the knowledge you need to be a city manager. So I spent some time there, eventually got promoted to assistant two, I believe, where I spent some time in technology. I was a technology manager for about 2.5 years. So everything was about 2.5 years. Spent about 2.5 years doing technology, which was another great experience. Walking into a group, I had 18-year-olds and 50-year-olds and everything in between, and it was my first real bigger supervisory, management experience. So that was, again, a great opportunity to learn another aspect of the profession. Eventually, as assistant two, I came back to the city manager's office. It was another year or two, and then eventually got promoted to assistant city manager. And I was assistant city manager for about 8 or 9 years. And that time, again, with the growth, and I was talking about how dynamic it is, we had reorganizations, we had some department heads leave here and there. And so every time a department head position would pop open, we had a new city manager at that time who had hired me. So at that point, every time something came open, I was like, "Hey, let me go do it for 6, 7 months or however long it takes to recruit somebody." And it puts me in an operating department, got to know, whatever it is. And so I've been in pretty much every version of a department. We've reorganized a couple of times, but pretty much have been a department head for almost every department in the organization over that period of time, which again, just gave me a great understanding of how, subcultures work and how the organization comes together. And it's just eventually in 2012, I got promoted to city manager when my predecessor retired.
Amazing. Okay, you said a couple things I want to dive into because I think these are going to be great. First, for the young people that listen to the podcast, you talked about again being kind of thrown into the weeds and kind of going, "Wow, your eyes get open to HR, your eyes get open to budget." When you have your undergrad in poli-sci and MPA, you would think, man, this guy's educated, right? And yet, like, local government's so expansive. How much? Because I wonder to encourage. I wonder if there's some young people that go, "Man, I have the degrees, but I still they might see an area in local gov and go, oh, I'm not trained for that. I'm not, it's always interesting to me to see the past city managers take. And oftentimes they'll start in a role that like engineering. They're like, I don't have an engineering degree. And yet local government trains you and it develops you. Maybe speak to that, like what's the word? When you came in, it just seems like you said yes. You just wanted to be like, I'm going to say yes to opportunity. Is there training? What did that training look like to get you up to speed in an area where you feel like I don't really know what I'm doing, but I need to jump in? I don't want my lack of knowledge to hinder me from saying yes to opportunity.
Yeah. And I think that's important. I think that a lot of people have a lot more capacity than they give themselves credit for. And, having the ability to, I think if you have, attitude's a big part of it, that you're willing to put in, have the attitude to go in and, ironically, I just had this session with our leadership academy and I was talking about it. Just, that experiences where I had to go into places that people had a lot more experience than I did. But, I bring to the table, they were saying, well, how do you kind of adjust to that? How do you integrate yourself in that situation where you don't have that experience? And I go, you bring to the table what you bring to the table. And then you, as a leader and as a manager, it's your job to bring everyone else to the table with you in an effective way, right? And so I don't go in and I never went in and acted like I knew more than anybody else. My shortcomings or my lack of technical expertise was something that I had to deal with on a different level. But building relationships, building teams, putting people together, creating a vision with people and getting them to buy into that. And then, systematically figuring out, okay, here's our vision. How are we going to get there collectively as a group? And then using those talents to do that. I think that was the biggest thing for me is, the technical side, whatever technical area I went into, I spent a lot of time, on the side reading articles, reading books, going to trainings, whatever I could do to soak up the technical aspects of it. But I was never going to be someone that had 20 years of any of those, right? I needed to know the language. I needed to generally understand concepts and be able to talk um, articulately with people who were, the experts in the field. But for me, it was all about building relationships everywhere I went. It was building relationships in the organization before I needed them, not after I needed them. So that's something we really emphasize here is that you never know when you're going to need somebody in a department that you don't deal with now. So getting out and meeting people, knowing people will absolutely benefit you whether you know it now or not. So I think that was my approach is, I would take any job. Honestly, if the city manager said, I need you to go do this, I'd be like, all right, I'm off. I'll go do it, figure it out, and make the best of it.
If you've attended a conference lately, I'm sure you've noticed that AI is everywhere in local government right now. In fact, it comes up in many of the conversations I have with leaders from across the country every week. There's so much to be excited about. The idea that we can streamline work, reduce repetitive tasks, and really help residents get what they need faster. These are all amazing things. It's one of the reasons I appreciate the way Tyler Technologies is approaching artificial intelligence. They're helping cities and counties like yours modernize workflows and use AI in practical ways that are actually improving operations and helping you deliver faster results for your residents. They've just released a new ebook. I want to encourage you to download it. It's called AI for Impact: Proven Results for Government. It highlights the real-world examples of how agencies are using AI right now to strengthen their daily operations to better serve their communities. That ebook, it's yours completely free. Head over to tylertech.com/winner to download your copy. And if you're going to be attending the National League of Cities Congressional City Conference in Washington, D.C., I want to encourage you to connect with the Tyler team there, get your questions answered, engage, and learn more about how you can implement and use AI in your context. Again, go download that free guide. It's at tylertech.com/winter, tylertech.com/winter. Now, back to the conversation. I think you said something that is so important. Leadership is different than just being the best at something. Skills are needed. And like you said, you needed to know so you could have conversation and communication. But leadership, I think it's one of the things I work a lot with the APWA about, we take these highly skilled people and then put them into leadership and they don't really have any training on leadership. And so what do? They default back into the weeds of doing instead of leading. And it's one of the key things I think you said. Leadership has different skills: relationship, networking, really trusting those who are skilled and empowering them to perform. And so it seems like you leaned into that. One of the things too you mentioned about that kind of they put an analyst from all these different departments together, and they did that, and you're still doing that today. It sounds like. That sounds like an incredible way to create collaboration, which is one of the kind of the problem challenge areas in local government. You have so many departments, and budget's always the issue. And when you're fighting for dollars, it can breed non-collaboration. It can be fighting over territory. It seems like, maybe speak to the impact of what that did when you were young in building collaboration, but what that does now as the leader of an organization, something like that, maybe to encourage another leader to go, hey, have you thought about, if you're struggling with collaboration, here's a way that maybe help build that.
Yeah, sure. I think, as I was younger and I was part of that team, it was one of the benefits of it was you get a lot of people who are generally in the same area of their career. And it's anywhere you go, there's a competitive environment in your organization of people that want to promote, want to do more things. And we had some rough groups with dynamics and positioning and all that other stuff. So on that side of it, it really teaches you conflict management. It teaches you to get along with different people. It teaches you to set aside your own ego or your own needs, kind of go with the group, and kind of like you get to this collaboration requires everyone kind of coming together and being willing to do their part or do a part that maybe they don't want to do. And so I think that, as a young person, I saw the value of that. I saw different personalities, different perspectives, and being able to work with them, and that's on the second side of it as a leader now, It's great for us because I think one is it gets people talking, and that's part of the culture. The culture is to be relational. We don't have backbiting and all that stuff. We don't really have culture like that, which has never been our issue. But it does, it's a bunch of people who are at the same level of their career, and it's great. A good example is just this past weekend. Our budgets were due on Monday, and I was hearing a story, just met with them all, and they were saying that one of them came in on Sunday, or it was Monday because I think it's President's Day. One of them comes in, and then all of a sudden they see a car in the parking lot, and they're like, "Wait, that's so and so." So they're texting each other, and they come to find out there's three or four of them. We're all here on the weekend in their offices working on budget. So instead of them just doing their own things and not talking to each other, they all end up kind of going back and forth and helping each other. There's some that are newer, some of the older. Veterans are now 3 years into it, so they're they're the experienced ones. But it's great just to see them helping each other out. Going to each other's offices, helping them understand the process, what the expectations are. And then, the other big outcome for us is we use that group, if you will, as a bench. And oftentimes when I have division manager positions that open up where I'm looking for someone to go in and work on a division, to reset a division, to kind of evaluate for, if you will, what's happening there and make sure it's back to alignment with where we need it to be. We'll pull from that group because if they've rotated to 2 or 3 different departments and they've worked on all these organizational projects, their ability to learn new concepts quickly is part of what they do every day. The fast-paced environment of getting one thing going to a completely different thing and switching gears effectively. The value of the relational aspect of the position and making sure that they have those relationships already when they go in and they can be successful. So, yeah, the program for us has been, back when I was in it, I think there was a very strong emphasis that if you wanted to be a management analyst, the city manager's expectation was you're going to be a city manager. And so it was kind of built on the concept of giving young people a roadmap, if you will, to get the types of fundamental experiences that you need to be successful to go down that path. And so we've gotten off of it a little bit. Shockingly, some people don't want to be city managers, but it's we still try to use that as kind of a career pathway, if you will.
Yeah. Well, I'll jump to this too. If that's the case, and I love that because obviously we need more development programs, but there's only one city manager in Santa Clarita. Now I'm talking to the guy who's ascended to the throne, but still, I think there's a beauty. I always said, when I was a pastor for a number of years, I said, we want to raise up, leaders, because if you go out and plant a church, you go join another church, that's a win. Like with city managers, I think we need the cities that can have the pipeline, that do have the ability to raise up and send out to other places as well. I'm sure Santa Clarita has sent out a number of people into city management positions around the nation, probably.
Yeah, we have. It's like, it'd be interesting to go back and kind of look, but I'd be willing to stake at least something on the fact that we probably have one of the cities with the highest number of individuals that have gone out to be city managers. Even right now, I can probably count at least 5 of them that are active city managers. Over the years, even more. So it's been a good model.
I love it. And so speak to, you're in all these departments, learning these different areas, and then you become an assistant city manager. Maybe tell the audience, because obviously we have a lot of city managers and department leads, that are in local government that know, but we also have some people that just listen because they're fascinated with local government. What is the assistant city manager position? Because it's not like you're the assistant too, and you're just, this, admin duties for the city manager. You're over oftentimes multiple departments, overseeing huge projects. What did that look like specifically? Tell us about the assistant city manager position and then what you did over your time in that role in Santa Clarita.
Yeah, it's funny. People always ask me what's my favorite position growing up in the organization, and the ACM is probably right there at the top. The ACM job is great because it's the number 2 position in the organization, at least for us. And there's different models, but generally speaking, it's the number 2 position in the organization. So you have a lot of influence. You have a lot of ability to be involved in the things that you want to be involved in. You have a lot of decision-making authority, but you get to focus more primarily on the internal organization. So typically, when I was the assistant, I oversaw the operations of the organization. So city manager was still involved, but on a day-to-day basis, I oversaw all the departments, oversaw the strategic planning aspect of it, the budget aspect. I was personnel officer, so dealt with all the personnel, all the labor negotiations, all of those things. Got to interact with the department heads on department issues on a daily basis. got to work more with the staff one-on-one and when those opportunities came up. So, my job was to run the internal operations of the organization, which it's the stuff I love doing, and so it was a great 8 or 9 year run.
So when you become the city manager, you said that when was that? 2012, you said?
Yeah.
Yeah. So what was the biggest change? Obviously, this is kind of what you've been aiming for. You're like, finally and you begin to become the city manager in the place that you're working, which is an oddity. Sometimes you have to kind of go out and do the whole rigmarole to be able to ascend right there in the place. What was it like? Maybe what was the eye opening, because it is a transition. Like you think, oh, now I'm just just have more authority and kind of do the same things. It sounds like it was a radical change now now you have electeds. Now you kind of the face when it comes to whatever residents. Tell us about what that looked like for you.
Yeah, it was probably the biggest realization setting in, because obviously I was the assistant for like I said, for a long time, and I had a really good relationship with my manager. So we interacted, multiple times every day. If whatever came up, we kind of talked about. There'd be times where we had disagreements, and I didn't understand kind of where he was coming from, and it's like, all right, let's whatever. I understand now. There's different pressure points. That's at the end of the day, the biggest realization is that as a number two person, you make a lot of decisions, you have a lot of influence, but at the end of the day, those decisions don't all come back to you. Those, no matter what staff's doing, no matter what project you're working on, ultimately that accountability comes back to one person, and that's the city manager. And so you realize all of a sudden that all of these things that you're involved in, that you're influencing, that you're probably making decisions on, but you have that a little bit of a level removed. All of a sudden you become the city manager and you realize that there's no pointing the fingers anywhere. It's all the fingers point to you. And so it's a little bit of a different level of ownership where, and I was, at the time I was 39 years old when I got appointed city manager. So I was still young. I think I just had my fourth child. And so, it was a little more heightened or awareness, if you will, that all of a sudden all those decisions land on one person.
Yeah. Maybe I want to dive into all that's happened over the last almost 15 years, right, as you've been in this role. But before we hit to that, let's talk about, you said the ACM was almost your favorite position. And I hear that over, ACM is such a great position because, again, you have authority and you're involved in some really cool things with the project, and you kind of have some safety, right? You don't have to necessarily I call it the CM is you're on the tightrope, municipal tightrope, kind of fighting the three-headed snake at times. It's like, oh, I got electeds, I got residents, I got staff. It's a lot to manage. And like you say, you can be the place where you can be the lightning rod where that hits. How do we encourage ACMs to take on the city management? What would you say? Obviously, we want to be mindful of. Yeah, here's the challenges. Here's the things that you do have to consider. But here's the reward of this position.
Yeah, it's, I said that, that was one of my favorite positions, and it was by far. But yeah, I tell you that, looking back over the last 13 years, I would never make a different decision in terms of moving into the city manager spot. It has been an amazing 13 years of growth and challenge and opportunity and, more challenges. But it's an amazing position. And so for me, what I do is, as part of my professional involvement, I'm the president for the California City Management Foundation. And our mission basically is to create or to promote excellence in city management. And part of that, one of our most popular, most, I guess, meaningful programs that we put on is called the New and Future City Manager Seminar. We do it once a year. It's for people who want to be or considering being a city manager within about 1 to 3 years, or city managers that just became city managers within the last year, maybe 2 years. So it's a cohort that's kind of mixture, but it tends to be mostly those contemplating the jump, so to speak. And so we do this every year, and it's an amazing opportunity to talk about the profession, to meet new people who have that energy, who have that that interest, but they're not really sure. And so we go through it. There's 4 or 5 colleagues of mine that we all kind of sit around. We run these different sessions with the cohort, never more than about 20, 22 people. So it's small enough to keep it, so that people are interactive. But we go through all the aspects of the job, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And sometimes we get to the point where, I usually facilitate it. So I'm usually like, all right, we have to make sure that we're, we're talking about the good parts of the job because there's still a lot of those. It's easy to focus on the griping part of it, or, the council members this, or community members this. But we have to focus on the aspects that are really what brought us here, what keeps us here for so long. And so for me, that's what it is. I mean, this profession is truly amazing. It's not for everyone, and I think that's why it's important. I think I would encourage anybody, my own staff, anyone else that's thinking about being a city manager, is to go to the seminar, because you're going to hear from 5 or 6 different people from different parts of the state, different levels of experience in different cities or whatever it might look. Talk about what the job's really about. It's not stuff that you're going to learn in a classroom. It's not stuff that you're going to learn at a conference in a session. It's much more down to earth. What are the actual challenges? How do you deal with challenges? And then why do we do this job? And so, like I said, going back, I wouldn't make a different decision. This being a city manager comes with so many opportunities to affect change, to have impact on people, that there's just very few careers that can match that level.
I love it. I love it. Say the name of that program again.
It's called the New and Futures City Manager Seminar, and that's through the California City Management Foundation.
Okay, great. Well, yeah, would love to encourage people to take advantage of that. That's why, like you say, I love those kind of opportunities where it's just the hands-on, a small cohort. So you're getting to, again, network, but with people who are most likely going to be in those fields, in those roles. So love that. So when you started, again, 13 years in this role, and Santa Clarita has had incredible growth during this time, what did it look like? Isn't it interesting to look back? Like you had said, like there is negative. There's realities right now that you guys are facing as city managers, that there's the national issues of politics, there's the local issues of politics, there's all of it in between, incivility going on with, I'm sure, residents, and everyone's got their opinion, social media, everyone can get on and leave whatever comment on their anonymous account, all these pressures to deal with. And yet sometimes when we look back, there were pressures 13 years ago when you started. But what's interesting is when you go through them, you kind of, you survive, you have success, and you kind of go, oh, it wasn't as bad as I thought it was. Sometimes you have to remember that. And that's why I love the podcast, kind of looking back. Would you remember, what were some of the issues? What were some of the things you were trying to tackle that maybe felt overwhelming? And then what has bred to the success? What does success look like over these years from when you took the role in 2012?
Yeah, I mean, I'll start with, we're very fortunate in Santa Clarita that, we've had a very stable political environment for the years. We've had some, bumps and bruises here along the way, but generally speaking, the council, the electeds they've all gone the same way, and they're tremendously supportive of staff. So that's one box that really helps, a lot of different things. Development has always been a big issue out here in Santa Clarita. We incorporated, almost 40 years ago, and it was all for the purpose of, controlling our own destiny. We were an unincorporated area of LA County, and there was a large sentiment of the community that felt that the county was just kind of using Santa Clarita as a dumping ground. It's like whatever developers want to do, just go do it. We were fighting a major, expansion or creation of a new dump, which would have been one of the largest dumps in the nation in our backyard. We were fighting a major landfill, not a landfill, but a mining area that we're still fighting 35 years later. So there's the premise of that whole community was that we wanted to control our own destiny. So as we started becoming a city and, development was still coming forward, we would have development projects, with maybe 500-600 housing units at a time. But we would be here till 2:00 in the morning. Remember, council chambers are packed, residents fighting development, going over stuff. And that lasted for quite a while. And then I think, sometimes things that happen broadly have a positive effect, if you will. The recession was in 07, 08. And so all development just kind of laid down for a while. And I think that it changed. And then with COVID, it changed, because now what you see, or what I see more here, is that you still get public opinion. You still get the virtue, all the angst and all the other stuff that come with it, but you get it on Facebook. You get it in social media posts. But the people, 20 years ago, all those people would be sitting in the council chambers. Now I think there's more of a sentiment that, if they say what they say on social media, they've done their part. So, there's been times where recently we've got some controversial stuff coming, and I'm expecting 100 people in council chambers, and 5 people show up. And so it's very, very different. So that's changed quite a bit. But I tell in terms of these things that you face and you get through. One of the things I've learned, and I've tried to tell younger people, is that sometimes issues are issues and sometimes they're not. And the worst thing you could do is try to solve an issue that's not an issue. So in other words, they're like something will come up and like, well, we should talk to so and so and get in front of this and all of them. Like, no, we'll just let it become an issue before we try to solve it. Because if you go try to solve an issue that's not an issue, you just created an issue.
Mm.
So I think as you get older, you definitely take a different approach. You definitely have less responsiveness to at least the anxiety aspect that comes with a lot of those controversial things that you face.
I want to take a quick moment to pause here because there's something I hear over and over again as I talk to local government leaders from across the country. The work can often feel heavy. The expectations are high, and most days it can feel like you're carrying all that weight alone. That's why I created the Municipal Leadership Development Circle, or what we call the MLDC. The MLDC is a community of local government leaders from across North America who are committed to growing together, supporting one another, and leading well in the middle of significant pressure, not just in theory, but in day-to-day practice. It's a place to think clearly, learn from others who truly understand your unique context and work, and to be reminded that you're not the only one navigating these unique challenges. If you're looking for connection, perspective, and a steady place to keep developing as a leader, I'd love for you to learn more. You can find details at haltingwinter.com/MLDC. That's haltingwinter.com/MLDC. Now, let's get back to the conversation. Such a great point. When you mentioned something about growth, and with growth, there's always this tension. I think the dichotomy of local government where you've got residents that don't want any growth, like we got to just right. And again, you can have things like a dump or whatever it is, mining, and you go, man, that's gonna totally change. We don't want that in our backyard, whatever that is. So you've got kind of an anti-growth, but then obviously you've doubled in size, so you've had growth. But it's local governments. That's the whole job of city halls, to figure out how do we grow health with health and growth. This is where, again, highlighting local government, you've got business, you've got housing, you've got all. It's not just one aspect of growth. You've got to have it all. You can't just have some huge company come in and then go, well, where are we going to house everyone? People got to drive half an hour, and so what did that look like? How do you balance that tension of wanting to keep a city and a place and have an identity where people live and work and play, but also navigate? You still have to grow. You want to continue flourishing, because things that don't grow die. And so what did that look like, especially in your role as a city manager?
Yeah, I think that, over the years, as I talked about the reasons for incorporation, one of the cultural aspects of, at least, both with the council side as well as the staff side, is, we view development as generally speaking positive, as you just mentioned, right? If there's some crazy project that's 10 times more bigger than it should be, obviously we don't see that as positive. But I think we see our role is that development is positive. Development is going to occur. You have when you're in North County, you're 35 miles outside of the city of LA, which is all building only can build straight up, and it's a whole different life out there. And you have property, and you have land, and you have developers. You have a reality of it's going to come. And so for us, the culture here has always been that development can be positive, but we want anything that comes through the city's entitlement process to add some value to the community. So in other words, the developers, if you let them, they'll build as minimal as they possibly can, spend as little money as they possibly can. But here it's like, we have a strong emphasis on quality of life. So for us, it's building parks, it's building paseos, it's adding to the trail system, it's adding to the open space that pretty much surrounds us 360 degrees, and somewhat creates a geographic isolation from a lot of other areas. And so we really look at that. We look at density, what's too much, what's too little, how does it fit within the character of the community. Spend a lot of time on architecture. We spend a lot of time on design. We're not front loading streets where we're going to have traffic issues later on. So we spend a lot of time, and developers here, if you come to, unless you're from the outside, you come in, it's not going to be a quick, build what you want to build and get out. It's going to be, you're going to have to build something that really creates and adds value to this community.
I love that. Yeah, it makes me think about Maple Valley up here in Washington. Laura Philpotts, the city manager, and it's that community has just exploded with housing. Everyone's exited, Seattle, Bellevue, et cetera, and wanted to buy a house, not live in an apartment. And so it's just housing, housing, housing. And they have specifically had to fight to keep areas for economic development because they're like, there's going to be a time where you want businesses, and if we don't have the land to have your places of grocery stores, et cetera, it's going to be a bad thing for us. And so it's one of those things about having to look, yeah, like you say, it'd be easy just to allow every business and every housing development come in, but then where are the parks? Where are people going to play? Where are people going to walk? And so navigating all those things, I think that people don't oftentimes give their local government credit for then doing those things that we just take for granted, right? It's like, oh, well, parks, libraries, whatever. It's like, no, these are essential for quality of life, like you say. So important.
Yeah, and if you don't get them on the front end, you don't. It's very hard to get them. We became incorporated, I remember there was a report that said we had $1 billion infrastructure deficit. Taking over from the county of Los Angeles, and their development standards are very, very different. In terms of what they require and what they don't require. And we're surrounded by LA County and incorporated, so a lot of the land that's been developed is built in the county. So we struggle a lot of times with developers who would rather entitle in the county than come to the city, because when you get to the city, it's much quicker and more efficient building permits and getting through it. But the entitlement side, it's a lot easier. So that's been a struggle for us. But and we've had times where we've had to come back, and like you said, it's like the parks and everything that come with it. Those things just don't happen by accident. If you have to pick them up on the backside, it's much more expensive and much more difficult.
I want to talk about you. You've won a number of awards, and so I want to dive into these because I think these are some really cool things to highlight and to look at, and because they're all a part of the success, I think, of what you're having there in Santa Clarita. One of the ones, award-winning mentoring program, Cal Cities gave you that. I don't know when that was in the timeline, but talk to us again. I just think mentoring development so vital. What was that award for, and what was that program?
Yeah, so the League of California Cities has the Helen Putnam Award, which is a statewide award that they give at their conference. And we won the award for, I forget, it was HR, I forget what the category was, but it was for the mentoring program. And, we've had a mentoring program, I'd say unofficially, we've had it, forever. More officially, we've had it for probably 25 years. It was one of the things when I was in HR, I really tried to more formalize and bring together structure to it. And now HR has even taken it a lot of steps further, where it's very structured in terms of the pairing, how you pair people, how you connect people together, what are the expectations within the program, making sure that it's useful. If you don't have structure, a mentoring relationship can be very useful, or it can be very time not spent well. And having the proteges in the group understand what their responsibilities are in terms of, hey, someone is giving you their time and their attention to be very intentional about something. So you have to come prepared to get something out of that. So what does that look like? And so we definitely have a very structured program that has, and it's amazing to me that it's one of a lot of things that we do, but I think we have probably pairings. We probably have 60 to 70 pairings, and we run it twice a year. So about 60 to 70 pairings every 6 months, which means that you've got 140 people, and we're full-time about just under 500, another 500 part-time. So it gets a lot of use and participation throughout all levels of the organization.
Speak to one of my philosophies is in dealing with burnout, but also trying to keep employees engaged and excited about what they're able to do and growing and staying in your organization. How do you solve burnout and turnover? Really, is you keep people active, you keep people on a trajectory towards something. It sounds like this program is that. It's a way to continue to level up, to learn, but also talk about maybe the impact of ownership. I wonder in all aspects of leadership, but even in a public sector, it can be like, oh well, I'm afraid if I give ownership away, then I'm not needed, and maybe I'll get replaced. And I just have never seen that. If you're a leader developing people, you're going to level up the organization. There's always going to be more to do and to lead in. Talk about what does that look like even in that program or elsewhere where you're trying to give ownership away to people. How do you do that in a healthy way that serves both them so that they can grow, but also serves the organization?
Yeah, I think it goes to, as I mentioned, I've used the term culture probably quite a few times, is it goes to the culture, it goes to the expectations of, everyone at all levels, are eligible to be mentors. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a department head are the only mentors. We've got mentors that are, at middle parts of the organization, but they're very technical. So people have mentoring relationships, but our expectation is that we are very much a learning, developing, growing organization. And there's definitely an expectation that people are constantly moving forward and working on their careers. So for the people that are mentors, they love it. I mean, some people get asked to be mentors, and they're like, they go to HR and they're like, well, I don't really know if this is something I can do or I should do. I don't know if I'm a mentor. I know enough to be a mentor. So it brings them out of their box, so to speak. It lets them see that their capacity is greater again than what maybe they see it as, but they start to see themselves more and more as a leader in the organization. So I think for us, it's kind of the opposite, where we've got a lot of mentors, I think, that really enjoy that aspect of their job. And so the more they do it, they more see that it's not just within the program that I have to be mentor. If I'm a manager, if I'm a supervisor, this is my job for all of my employees. And I think creates a higher level of expectation and execution outside of the program of owning that relationship with their employees and being that mentor and constantly focusing on it. Because it does need to be intentional. It's not going to happen if it's not intentional.
It seems like in the leadership development program I run, we're talking about a couple books that talk about kind of employee engagement and some of the challenges that happen, especially in local government, where you'll be working on a project and all of a sudden elected officials want to go a different route or something happens budget wise and you got to change direction. And they talk about how the impact then of it can kind of feel, what's the word? It can be disheartening to be like, I did all this effort and now it's like, it's not even, we're not doing it. What a waste kind of thing. And so that's where you breed bureaucracy and red tape and people kind of checking out. It seems like this is a great way to keep people engaged in work. They feel, what incredible identity, worth, and value you get when you are seen as, I'm a mentor. I'm actually helping people like with their lives and with their careers and with the city. It seems like a really empowering program, not only for the people being mentored, but the mentors.
Yeah, it is. And I think that, you get those situations where, sometimes the elected officials want to go a different direction, and may not be for technical reasons. It may be for reasons that are beyond, our scope or our control. And I think if you have people that have the ability to step outside their own roles and be mentors, I think they're also more able they're better equipped to step outside of their egos of their technical, this is my program, I came up with it, and now nobody wants it anymore, right? It's like, well, it happens to all of us, and it's just part of the job. And so I think so. But for us, it's like I said, it's the mentoring program is one of 6 or 7 different things that we do. The other thing that, that they really, I think that people love is we've got a job shadowing program. And this was a program that I kind of came up with years and years ago. And we did a workforce development plan. And so we came up with a bunch of different concepts. So one of them was this whole aspect of, we have a lot of really talented people. And so once you get to that level just under division manager, oftentimes you get pressure because division managers, they don't move very often. At least ours, ours stay for a very long time, unless they become department heads. Sometimes they leave later, but it's a tough position to crack into because they just don't move. And so it creates that pressure point, if you will, at, if you're a senior level person and you want to promote, but you're looking up and like, my boss isn't going anywhere. So we have a job shadowing program, and the whole concept of developing was to give people the opportunity to not only look up in the organization, but to look side to side. And so, we are very big. We're not a bureaucratic organization that says, hey, if you start in public works, the only career path you have is in public works. It's if you're in finance, you're going to be in finance. It's, we very much focus on the leadership qualities that make a good manager, that make a good leader, and feel that we could plug them into different places, as we talked about earlier, that can learn technical skills. And so it's another hugely popular, we probably get over 100 people participating in that. And that's anyone that can basically say, hey, I'm interested in what you do on a daily basis. Can I spend 4 hours a day with you on one day, just to spend 4 hours, take me around, I'll ride along with you, I'll go to your meetings, whatever it is. And it just gives them insight into something completely different than what they do every day. So even if it's not something they're like, well, I think I want to go this career, I want to change careers and go this way. If nothing else, it still gives them organizational awareness, right? So they now know what the other side of the organization does that's completely different than what I do. And it builds those mutual, again, relationships with people who don't work together. And so those are the kind of programs I think that really do create that engagement, that people like where they work. They see opportunities. They see that they're doing great work now, but there's still, tons of other things that they can do if they really choose to do that.
Again, it goes back to the whole collaboration, but even so, maybe speak to this. My assumption is that can help with what one of the issues of local government is the motto of, well, this is the way we've always done it. If you've got people moving in and across departments, that breeds what I call the fresh eyes impact, where all of a sudden you have people going, well, why are you doing it this way? And like with you and your story, like you're put over IT, you know, IT, and to think about IT, if you're over IT in the 90s, think about how much IT has changed in just 20 years and how much more it's going to change in just the next 5. So, what does that look like? How has that kept your organization maybe fresh and maybe had new creative ideas and how you even operate instead of getting, like you say, the kind of what can happen is to pigeonhole and go, well, I've only been in finance or I've only been in public works, and so it's kind of the way we've always done it. Maybe speak to that.
Yeah, I think that is definitely a benefit. I think that, it's we're trying to see how I phrase this. So we are 40 years old. We have a big portion of the population within the last maybe 5+ years that have been retired. And that segment of the population was here almost since incorporation. So when you have people that work in the same place, especially if they work in the same positions for that period of time, for that long, that definitely sets in. So I think if you're able to create these different opportunities where you are bringing in different people that have different levels of energy, different levels of engagement, but also can look at something and be like, well, why are we doing it this way? Why don't we do it this way? And challenge that process. But I think that's part of it and that's why I love the fact that so many I don't even know how many we have now, but so many people that either one started as interns and now left as division managers or something else, or started in one area, worked through 3 or 4 different places, and left at a completely different place. I think all of those opportunities are best for the organization, and it keeps people and motivated. It's like I said, they're doing something different, different challenges, facing those things, and so we I think it's been effective for us. Like I said, we don't. I always tell people I don't want to be one of those guys that talks about how great things are and then have no data to back it up. So we measure everything. We do an employee survey every 2 years. We do a public opinion poll every 2 years, offsetting. So we just finished our latest employee poll or employee survey. And two of the things that really stuck out to me, the scores were very high across the board. But 2 questions. One was, if you had to do it all over again, would you take your job again? Would you take your same job again? And it's at a score of 1 to 5, 5 being the highest, it was like 4.6. So I would absolutely take my job again. And the other question had to do with, when you get up in the morning, do you like going to work? And that's, you're asking people, do you like to get up to go to work? And same thing, that score I think was like 4.6, 4.5. So it really tells you that people, at least for me, where we have 91% response rate, that people enjoy what we're doing, has some value, and it's working. So people are engaged, they like what they're doing, they like.
Well, that is I believe that is a sign of culture. And when you have a healthy culture, people love, again, they find identity, worth, value. They feel like they're contributing to something significant. And so that, again, that comes back to, I think, your leadership, the other leaders that you've developed there. You've won Cal City as another outstanding assistant city manager, an ICMA award for career excellence. Again, that speaks to the culture and what you guys are up to. Maybe speak to that. Is there anything else when you look at the success of what you're doing and leading in Santa Clarita? Is there anything else specifically with culture? How are you not only, it's one thing to build it, it's another to sustain it. I think sustaining a great culture is much harder than even building it. How are you doing that? What are some of the things that you're doing that you would say are unique?
Well, I think what's unique about us is the amount of time, resources, and effort that we put into that concept. I think a lot of organizations get very busy and they're focused on the day to day by and large. As I mentioned, we do a lot of things consistently. Like I said, we measure everything that we do as much as possible across the board, so that we know whether we're being successful or we need to deal with things. The employees, we spend time to do that survey because we truly want to know what's happening in the organization. How are people feeling? Are there divisions, are there functions that are that aren't operating at the level that we're looking for? And we have an expectation that they are. As I mentioned, it's one of the things I did is I had my management team meeting the other day, and I recognized the top 3 division managers that just blew the survey out of the water. It's just like, that's amazing leadership that you guys can get all these people saying the same things about what you guys are doing. And ironically, the three areas that got the highest scores from employees were community preservation, um, traffic, and I forget what the third one was. The third one was an equally some of the hardest services that you put out there that to make people happy that they're generally unhappy about, right? Code enforcement coming to your door. People always gripe about traffic, and I wish I remembered the third one, but those are the three divisions that those managers were able to have their employees engaged, happy. So I think we're intentional. I said we have a leadership academy, we have a supervisor series, we have the mentoring program, we have the job shadowing program, we have a trade series, we have an administrative series. So we put together these training programs and these opportunities that focus. We don't leave anyone out. There's something for everyone to continually develop their skill set and then use that as a jumping off to something else where they're constantly engaging in the organization, learning about the culture, hearing the values. What are the types of things that make you successful in this organization? It may not be the same everywhere, but these are the culture, the values that make you successful here. And so I think those programs are tremendously successful. And then the other thing is we spend a lot of time on wellness. And so the concept of wellness is we have a wellness committee that's made up of people throughout the organization, different levels that come together. We have a golf tournament, we have a kickball tournament. We have a number of like lunch sessions where it's not focused just on physical health. It's focused on financial health. It's focused on mental health. It's focused on diet. What are good diets and things of that nature. So it's an overall employee wellness program. We're looking at not just for the employee on that side. We're looking at how do we create an employee who is well. You know what I mean? The more well they are, obviously, the more they're going to function and be happy and be able to contribute. So it's just a number of organizational development programs that all kind of support each other and really try to go at all aspects of the employee. And we spend a lot of time on it. We're a very busy organization, but it's still one of those things where I tell the managers, it's like, hey, if your employees want to do this, it's your job to figure out how to let them do it.
I love that. It's specifically you are programming it. It's a priority, and it's woven into the tapestry of what you're doing. So it just can't be. That's kind of the issue. If you're just trying to do a thing here or there, it can be easily not done, or something comes up and then you don't do it or you delay it. And again, I think that's one of the keys of if you really want an outstanding culture and to sustain it, you've got to program and prioritize it into the everyday things of what you're doing. It's awesome. I want to be mindful of your time. You obviously, again, Cal Cities, I know Cal Cities, I think just had their city manager conference up in the northern part. Well, speak to, in your unique role, there's only one city manager in Santa Clarita. Obviously, you've got LA, and there's people around that you can connect with, but it can be a very isolating role where you can't just hop down to a chamber of commerce lunch and hang out with other city managers. What does it mean to be a part of some of these other organizations, Cal Cities, ICMA? How do you find connection to the other people, not only for ideas but also just for support, for encouragement in that unique role?
Yeah, I think that's important, and I think that that's why I became the president of the California City Management Foundation, because we do, as part of that organization, we have a strong emphasis on networking and coming together. We have a huge dinner at that conference that we just did that we had over 300 people at. We do networking opportunities quarterly in different parts of the state, so that we're bringing city managers together. So it's lonely at the top, so to speak, right? It's hard to, you griping to your staff isn't really the best way to handle your displeasure about something. So having those people in the profession, and I've been fortunate, I've been around for a long time, and, I could say that the relationships that I developed through those professional organizations, going all the way back to MMASC, which is Municipal Management Association of Southern California. I got involved in that very young, and I met a bunch of people, and, a handful of those guys that I knew back then are now city managers, and some of my best friends and colleagues that I still have the opportunity to interact with, and have that that's where you go and just kind of talk about stuff, and share your war stories. So it's very important, and I think that's why professional organizations, and we emphasize that here, is that to be a whole employee is not just 8 to 5 here. You've got to go out, you've got to get involved in the community, you've got to go out and be part of the professional organization. Signing up and paying the $100 dues doesn't make you part of the organization. So going out, being part of it, taking on a leadership role, those are the relationships that will last you, a career, right? Those are the guys, like I said, now guys and ladies that I've known for almost my whole 30 years that are still, working as city managers, and some of my best friends.
You said it. I just want to highlight it again. Personal well-being, make sure that you, again, that doesn't mean you can't have the fuel gauge to full all the time. It doesn't work that way, but you got to be above empty. And I think that's kind of the danger of servant leadership, is that we end up sacrificing our life on the altar of service, and we don't fill the tank, both personally, we don't have healthy outside of work lives, and we're not taking the time, we're making the excuses not to go to the events because it's like, oh, I'm just too busy. And it's like, if you really want to have impact and long-term impact, you got to take care of yourself personally. You got to take care of yourself professionally in ways that can give you ideas, give you support so that you can thrive. And so I love that you highlighted that, pointed that out. How do you, maybe that's the last question I'll ask, is just, I always pull up work-life balance. It's the keynote I give around the nation. Balance is BS. There's no such thing as perfect balance. It's a matter of intention, right? You have to be intentional. You have to make choices. What does that look like? How have you wrestled with that over your entire career, but especially now being in the city management?
It's easier now, that, my children are older. I'm getting toward the I guess the twilight of my career. But growing up in New York and becoming a city manager, even though I was the ACM, was still a tough job. But I guess I mentioned earlier I have 4 kids, and my oldest, my 2 oldest, I coached baseball and football until my oldest was in high school. My second one, I coached football, and baseball, well, all the way for football all the way through, and then he stopped playing for a couple of years of baseball. But and then my third one, I just finished coaching him through 8th grade. So I've always been very intentional about making sure that the things that are truly important in life don't get overridden by a meeting that really isn't that important, or an event, if you will, that's really not that important. I think that as city managers, we put a lot of pressure on ourselves. I think a lot of us are more type A personalities where it's very hard driving. I have to be here. I have to work hard. Being in the office is working hard. Going to this event, by the number of hours doesn't necessarily mean that's you're working hard. You're working effectively. So I think for me, the advice I've always given people is that what gets scheduled gets done. And so for me, I have football games. I have football practice. That means I got to leave at 5 o'clock. I'm out of here by 5 o'clock. There has to be a crisis, if you will, to make me stay in this practice, which I don't know that I ever really did. But it is. It's the thing is, you get older, you realize that time goes very fast. And if you have kids and you're sacrificing that time with your kids to be at work, I guarantee you're not going to remember what you missed to miss that game. But I'm sure your kids do remember that you missed that game. So I think it's tough, but I think that especially if you're younger, you got to schedule it. You got to give yourself the grace to say, hey, like this is not out of the ordinary, and that if you want to be healthy and you want to not be completely stressed out of your mind, you've got to make time for that type of stuff.
Such great advice. And I think there are a lot of expectations, but a lot of those can be assumptions that we just assume I've got to be the first one in, last one out. I can't take my vacation. And I think that you got to get outside of the space between your ears and actually have some conversations, right? And especially if you're a city manager, because I think that's that weight. We all want to impress, but now you've got the expectations, assumptions of electeds. You've got residents. I mean, again, you could show up to everything, and it's like you say, is it really important? Am I making a difference, or am I just sitting in a meeting just because I felt like I had to and I didn't really contribute to anything, and now I'm missing out on my own health and about the relationships of others? So really good insights. Anything else, Ken, as you look at just an incredible career and impact? Any advice for young people thinking about the career path, and anything for current city managers who are rowing in the same waters?
Yeah. My only advice is, as I mentioned, I'll put a plug in here if I can. We're also, one of the things that we're focused on at CCMF is we have a mid to late career workshop, and we have this workshop because we've always done the new and futures and spent a lot of time and got a huge value out of that, and just seen the impact it's had on all these people that have gone through it. And so we asked ourselves, it's like, for guys and ladies that are at this stage of the career where they've got, maybe 5-7 years left, and, a career, and, 15 years as a city managers, I always kind of joke around, it's like dog years, right? It's not a year for years in a normal job. So that pressure builds up, that all that stuff accumulates over time. And so it gets to, some of the questions you're just asking me in general is, as city managers, as individuals, how do you, chart your own course for the rest of your career? So not treading water, not just trying to survive, not just getting through until I can reach 55 and, pull my papers and get out of here. It's how do you make the most out of that last stage of your career and be healthy? and be well and create your own legacy. And once again, like I said, kind of chart your own course for that. Because if you're not intentional about it, that 5 years will be gone. And you'll just struggle with it. As you have to, you'll go with the goods and the bads. But so we put together this seminar that's coming up in April. We're hoping that we get a good turnout of guys and women at that level, because I think it's important. We're all about not dealing with necessarily just the profession, but the individuals who serve in those positions as well. And so I think for guys and ladies at that age, that stage, it's kind of a great opportunity again to be intentional about kind of charting your course. For younger people, same thing. It's an amazing job. It really is. I wouldn't do anything different. I have a whole list of things that I keep in my little note section of my phone that says cool things I did as a city manager. And it's just, I go through that once in a while, and, places I've been, opportunities I've got to be involved in, being up in a fire helicopter in the middle of a wildfire, with flames, 100 feet below you. It's just experiences that you just don't get as a normal person. And those things all offset, the things that you got to deal with that are challenges. So it's a great profession. I highly recommend it. But I think that's some of the advice I'd leave with.
So good. I'm going to put a link to that a program event in the show notes below, so you can check that out. Man, incredible story, incredible impact. Looking forward to seeing. Again, you said you still the plan. We didn't even dive into the strategic plan is still 300,000 plus, and so you guys are still rowing. You're still in the middle of the water, so I love it. Love seeing that. Thanks, Ken, for sharing your life, your leadership journey, and your insights with us today.
Thank you very much for having me. I appreciate the time.
The stories we share here on the HaltingWinter podcast remind us where government really lives, locally, right here in our cities, our counties, the communities that shape our everyday life. If today's conversation resonated with you, please subscribe and share the episode to help these stories reach others. I'm Seth Winterhalter. You can find me at haltingwinter.com. Until next time, thanks for listening.